Hi, I'm Marc Mulligan and I'm a Quality Manager here at the Money and Pension Service. Now in this video I will be explaining a little more about our expectations for guidance services when it comes to standard 4C. The 4C standard is all about informing the consumer about the service before they substantially engage with it. 4C1 is around the scope, purpose and limitations of the service. 4C2 is about the types of questions a consumer may be asked in order to provide suitable guidance. And 4C3 is about how the consumer's data will be stored and managed. So let's begin with our expectations on 4C1. The service is expected to inform the consumer up front about what they can and cannot do for them. Now this should allow the consumer to make a choice as to whether the service is right for them. Ideally, this would be explained before the start of an interaction, but if this isn't possible, it is acceptable to present this information early on in the interaction, but before any further exploration into the consumer's presenting issue. Now, as an example, this information could be delivered by a practitioner or through an automated system such as an interactive voice response, which is more commonly known as IVR. It's not necessary to go into a huge amount of detail, but as a minimum, guidance services should be explaining that they do not deliver advice and what that means for the consumer. Now let's move on to 4C2. The consumer should be prepared to answer questions about not just their presenting issue, but also any other areas the service may deem relevant. This could include personal and financial information, and so the consumer must be informed up front of the types of questions that they may be asked. But that's not to say the service needs to detail the exact questions that they will be asking, more just the categories of questions. For example, to say, I will ask you some questions about your personal and financial circumstances will suffice in most cases. Again, this should be done ideally before the start of an interaction, or as early on in the interaction as possible, but it must be before any further exploration of the consumer's presenting issue. Now again, this could be delivered by a practitioner as an example, or via something like an IVR. Where a future appointment is being booked, for example, pension-wise, the consumer must be informed of the sort of information that they should have ready for that appointment. And finally, 4C3. The minimum expectation here is that the consumer is informed of how they can find out more about how their data is handled. It's not necessary for a practitioner to explain the detail of the service's data protection policy directly to a consumer. A signpost to the relevant policy is sufficient, and this could again be done verbally or via an IVR. 4C3 must be done before any data about the consumer is recorded. This includes voice data, and so should be done before a recorded interaction begins. All three of these standards have been identified as possible candidates for our revised pre-assessment process. This means that if evidence can be produced that any of these standards will be met every single time for every interaction, regardless of the consumer circumstances, it will be pre-approved and will maintain an always met status until the service changes that evidence. That's all for now for this video. I hope you found this exploration of the 4C standards for guidance useful. For more information, go to the MaPS Standards page on maps.org.uk.